Hello and welcome to another Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast brought to you by nobody, because nobody listens and nobody cares. So thank you, Gustavo, because maybe you'll listen, or maybe your partner, Bear, who we've had before, will listen. But I'm honored and really excited to be back here. Outside this time, because last time when we did your partner in crime, Bear, we were inside, and this is not a bad view.
We have great views all around, but
Yeah.
Let me just break it to you. We listen and we care. So
Mira Vineyards, we listen and we care. So you've got degrees from Berkeley and Davis.
that's right.
Which school you like better?
Well, I studied different things at different places. I went to Berkeley, not knowing that I was going to major in chemistry and not knowing what I was going to end up doing career-wise after Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Davis where I actually got the training for what I do now.
Yep.
But what I usually tell people is the real education for me was when I worked at Art Mondavi.
Okay.
And
that was pretty impressive. I mean, you started there and then became the head red winemaker, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I started in the lab. Once I realized that I wanted to be in the wine industry, it never occurred to me that Napa was kind of in my backyard, because it never occurred to me to work in wine. It's not like when you're a kid, you're thinking, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I want to be a winemaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Want to be a pilot, baseball player, maybe something like that.
Dancer.
Exotic dancer.
I didn't say exotic dancer.
I did.
Oh, my Lord. Ayo.
But I'm not a good dancer, so, and I was a good baseball player.
You put enough alcohol in you and you put maybe a pole and you're good to go.
That's true. That could happen.
Now, was your family in the wine business?
No, my family, we were involved in agriculture in Sacramento in the Central Valley. So my father was involved in a cannery where they canned peaches and made tomato sauce and ketchup and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And though a fascinating process, not sexy enough to have people visit.
Yeah.
So,
So you joined the wine business.
So I joined the wine business.
Yeah, exactly. So you've made wine in 5 different countries.
Yeah, that's right.
And you made also had your part in 100-point Ornellaia, I believe.
Yeah, we made the Maceto 2001 at Ornellaia that got the 100 points, and that was back when it was there wasn't as much grade inflation back then, so the 100 pointers were not as easy to come by as they may be now.
Right.
But
I don't know what you're talking about, or if you advertise and
right.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
If you advertise in the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast, we'll definitely give you 100 points. What is this, 100 points? What is it, 106? Remember, like in school, if you spelt your name right, you got an extra 3 points?
That's right.
Got 103 points?
And that's what I'm waiting for. I want to be the first winner that gets 101.
You know who will probably give, who's the one, is it Suckling? Who's the one that always gives a couple extra points? Is it Suckling? James Suckling?
He's the one that gave us the 100 points in Maceto, so I hope not.
Okay, maybe not. So it was really a 96 and a half.
Yeah, maybe it was really a 98.
There was a kid, what was his name? I can see his face. Sean Bradley, went to high school with him, and he decided to fall asleep during a test, and the Mr. Angelista, Tony Angelista, I'm Tony Angelista. If you get hit by a car and you late for my class, you late for my class. I can see him vividly. He was my math teacher in high school. And this kid fell asleep in the test, forgot to put his name, so he didn't even get 4 points. He got 0, because he always gave you 4 points for your name. So, but I guess so. Tell me the print. So you went to UC Davis, and then what happened?
Well, I'll tell you how I got into the wine industry is when I was my senior year at college at Berkeley. I started thinking, well, what am I going to do? And what am I interested in? And I used to work at a water slide park every summer in Sacramento.
Seriously?
Yeah,
I can see that.
Counting money. I wasn't a lifeguard. I was more in
weren't
the
wearing a Speedo.
Side
Okay.
when we're in a Speedo.
Business side of it.
And so me and my buddies, there's 2 other people. We were the only ones that had access to the cash room, the key to the room, which is where we hung out. And somehow, somewhere along the lines, I started really getting into wine, and I started trying to figure out as much about it as I could. I realized, what is it that I like about it? There's the ag portion, of course. There's the creativity. There's the history. And there was a bottle of Art Mondavi Cabernet in my dad's cellar that had this big, it was an 80s bottle, that had this big mission statement on the back that I thought, wow, that's the kind of industry I wanted to be in. I don't remember it verbatim, but it starts with wine. Wine has been with us since the beginning of civilization, and it's part of the gracious way of life. It was kind of like the end of it. And I was like, that's pretty powerful. Who knew about wine? We drank wine at the house. It wasn't a big deal.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what do you need to do to work in the wine industry? And so my buddy says, well, if you go to UC Davis, you can get a degree in beer making and winemaking. I'm like, I thought you were my friend. Why didn't you tell me this 4 years ago? I wouldn't have wasted 4 years with doing chemistry, you know, and I would have gone straight to it.
Right.
And so I went to Davis. I realized that I loved it. And that was kind of it. You know, I got those degrees. I started working in the wine industry. I started as an intern at Robert Mondavi in the lab, taking samples for the winemakers back then.
What was that like?
It was awesome. I mean, you know, I'd have to get up like at 4:30 in the morning to be at the cellar or at the site where we were taking the samples at 6 a.m. And it seemed like, you know, not a very important job,
right.
maybe taking samples, but it really allowed me like a hands-on opportunity to see the fermentations in action, right? I mean, we read about in school, we've seen some fermentations in jugs and stuff like that, but it really allowed me to follow these different tanks that we were sampling day in, day out to see what actually happens during the course of a fermentation and some of the things that could go wrong and some of the things that could go great. And I just found that I really, really loved it.
I heard you were the longest intern ever. You're an intern for 6 years.
Well, you know, they kind of realized that I was really into it, and then they basically created a position for me in the lab to start out.
So what was the title? Because everybody loves titles. It's just lab
technician, yeah. And I was
lab technician 1. You know how they have sometimes they have lab technician 1, 2, and 3. You're just
right. No, it was just lab technician. Nice. Keep it simple. You know?
The first ever lab technician.
No, there were other lab technicians at the time. Shoot. There were other ones, but I was not the
that would have been a good story if you were the first ever one.
No, yeah, there were others, but eventually I became enologist there, and so I became much more involved with how the lab information carries through into production. And from there, I became the winemaker for first the Botrytis wine, which is a wine that nobody wanted to make because it's the last one that you do, and the one that's made from rotten grapes, and it's very difficult.
Was that the name of the wine too? Botrytis.
Botrytis, because that's the fungus that basically rots out the
Wonderful.
grapes.
Was it your number one selling wine?
I loved it.
Really?
I loved it. And then there was a Swiss journalist that came a couple years later and tasted it, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is like the best wine of its type ever produced in America."
You can have it all.
And it was awesome. Really? I loved it. Yeah. I was really into those kind of wines when I first started out, Sauterne style wines. I really, really just loved the whole process and the fact that you can make something so glorious out of something that looks so awful.
Isn't that like a tummy tuck in plastic surgery?
Kind of.
Yeah. I should look into that.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about doing something like that here at Mira?
You know, eventually.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun to try something like that. We just planted this vineyard a couple years ago, and we expect the first real fruits to start growing this year. Mm-hmm. And maybe at some point we can start making something like that once we've got the rest of the site figured out.
What would you call it?
Hopefully not Botrytis. We'd have to come up with something a little prettier than that.
The Bear's Den.
We'll see.
Yeah. That's crazy. So you went from Robert Mondavi to where?
So I was at Robert Mondavi. I got sent to Italy to work at Ornellaia.
I love how you got sent to Italy.
Well, you know, speaking a few different languages and
right,
you know, enjoying the culture went a long way, and being the one that was not chosen but told to go live in Tuscany. You know, for
chosen
a year.
Sounds better.
Chosen sounds better, but you know, not to make it sound all fun and games. When I was in Tuscany, I lived about an hour and a half away from Florence, towards the coast, just about 40 minutes south of Pisa.
Oh.
But it sounds great and it's beautiful in the summer. But as soon as summer, there's a lot of visitors in the summer, a lot of tourists, and as soon as the summer is gone, everybody's gone. Restaurants close. There's not a whole lot to do.
Isn't that crazy?
No cable TV.
Like they really do shut down. People don't understand that.
They shut down. And so the only choice I had was just to be there. And I lived on the property, and the winery was in a different location on the property. So I'd either ride my bike or walk to the winery every day. And so that really gave me an opportunity to check out the vineyards on a daily basis on the way to the property. And just being there all day with nothing to do, tasting the wines constantly, right, and trying to figure out how you can improve the wines.
Yeah, you should have got a cat or a bobcat or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. So then you were in Italy for a little bit. Then where next?
I was in Italy. I came back. I became they gave me the white wines as my prize for coming back.
Is that a prize?
Well, you know, they didn't want to give me the reds just yet because they wanted to give me a little bit more responsibility. And then I got the red wines, and I think it was my first vintage on the reds when the scores came out for the Massetto, and that was it. You know, it's like I got 100 points on the Massetto, and they're like, yeah, I guess this guy does all right, so we'll just let him make the Cabernets too.
Really?
And so so I became the winemaker for all the red wines coming out of Napa Valley, and later on, when the company that bought Mondavi they were also the owners of Rufino Wine Estates in Tuscany. I became the director of production for Rufino Wine Estates.
Oh my gosh!
In Tuscany, and I had a little project with a buddy of mine from Quebec, actually making wine in Burgundy as well, because my whole mission has been to learn as much as I can about the different techniques of making wine and how grapes grow in different areas and what the flavor effects are, and always trying to be a little bit better at what I do, knowing that every year is different and the parameters change on you a little bit. But I was always, and I still am, really intrigued about pretty much every aspect of growing grapes and making wines and being better. So that's taken me a lot of places. I worked in Brazil. I started for a couple of families some wineries and vineyards in areas that had never grown grapes before or made wine.
Can they grow grapes in Brazil? I mean, if you grow them in Missouri and Arkansas, I guess you can grow them anywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's an area that is basically where the grapes, they're Napa Valley essentially, but it's all because of people that settled there, brought their tradition. It's not necessarily the best place to grow grapes. And so we found other areas that maybe had more suitable climate for doing this. And so we pioneered these two areas in Brazil, of all places.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
So we're at Mira.
We're at Mira.
You got some weeds.
Well, we're in the wet season,
yeah,
right? And if you look at our vineyard, we're working on cover crops that will deal with the moisture and basically weed abatement, so we don't have to.
We call that weeds in my backyard. Let's be honest. And I know this is your backyard.
This is my backyard, but this isn't what you see in the vineyard is intentional, except for the mustard. That's just kind of wild. But if we didn't have, like, you see every other row, there's grass. There's a certain kind of grass growing there. And then on the other row, there's some legumes, basically. So we're looking to soak up the moisture, but also at the same time, when we mow this, provide nutrients to the plants. And so just kind of making this its own little microcosm and try to encourage better soil conditions and better microorganisms in the soil and stuff to really produce higher quality grapes.
So when I don't pick weeds one day, I'm going to tell my wife what you just told me. Better microorganisms in the soil.
You're working to improve the soil conditions, right, for your crops.
Does it really help that much?
It does.
Wow.
It does.
Interesting.
Yeah. So and it's a process that takes a few years. If you had come back, if you were here last year around this time, we'd have real weeds growing there, and so this is stuff that we've planted over the last couple of years, and it's done a really good job of just taking over what the weeds were doing.
I think Bear just hasn't kept up with weeding. I tell him that.
I'll tell him.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'll text him. So what's growing behind me?
So here we've got Merlot right directly behind us, and then just to the north of that by the weather station, we got Petit Verdot.
Nice.
And just behind the Merlot, we have the 2 blocks of white grapes that we grow. So we have Sauvignon Gris, which is pretty unusual in California. There's not a lot of it planted anywhere and very little in Napa. And we have Sauvignon Blanc next to it. So they're related varietals. So I'm really excited to see what we're going to
Why'd you do that?
Out of Gris. Something different. And this site is pretty good for Bordeaux varietals, and maybe people would have the tendency to go for Sauvignon Blanc because it's more common and maybe more people have heard about it. But I've had some fantastic Sauvignon Gris and fantastic Sauvignon Gris, Sauvignon Blanc combinations, and I thought, let's do something different. We get the chance to do this. Why not?
So you've got a really interesting story, how Mira came to be. Some people, they're born into the family of the winery, or they started, or what have you. You met your partner at a bar.
Well,
I mean, it's a true story.
It's a true story.
In D.C.
In D.C.
So you're working for Robert Mondavi.
That's right.
And Bear was, what was he? He was doing PR for politicians, correct?
Yeah, he had a communications company in D.C. where he did stuff for a bunch of different people that hired his firm, basically.
You know what catapulted him? Was the couple, like the year or so, he was like the finest valet parking attendant. Did he ever tell you that story?
Yeah.
In that 7 parking lot? Yeah. I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But so you're meeting this guy. I've heard the story from him, and obviously, he's with his Arkansas accent. Well, it's not Arkansas accent because he's not from Arkansas. He went to school in Arkansas. But what did you think? You met this guy at a bar. You're in the wine industry. You're doing very well. You meet some random guy at a bar. Most people that I meet at a bar, I usually don't talk to after.
Well, I would say in my defense, I had already had a few drinks in me, so I was prepared
Cheap
for it.
date.
But I had finished a winemaker dinner that's five courses paired with wine, that kind of evening, and I just wanted to have a beer nightcap before going to bed, basically.
Right. Yeah, and you had more than a beer.
So we ended up having more than a beer. We ended up having, he's no stranger to working hard. When he told the story about parking cars and stuff like that. I mean, he earned his stripes, and that's kind of how I felt that I've done as well. I've earned my stripes, and we had that in common. And this desire to
good excuse.
No, this desire to always try to be the best at what you do. And I've always had the dream of making my own wine, like a lot of winemakers do around here. And fortunately, we live in a country where you can achieve a lot of your goals and dreams and stuff like that. And so it was just, Providence, basically, that I met him that night. And we became really good friends, and he wanted to be a part of this, making this little amount of wine that I had envisioned at the time, just a little bit small side business, making our own wine.
This ain't a small side business.
And all of a sudden, here we are with this real animal.
Yeah.
No more stuffed animals.
Yeah. So the next day you wake up, head probably hurts, body kind of hurts. Did you really think he was serious?
Yeah, I thought so. We had a good conversation, and we didn't say, okay, we're going to start this tomorrow, right? And so it's like, okay, well, I met this guy, and let's just see where it goes, And by the way, I had to get up and work the next day. I had to go out and taste more wines, so I didn't have a whole lot.
You're
of time.
You're a winemaker, whatever.
Right? I didn't have a whole lot of time for headaches or anything like that. I had to get going.
You're a professional.
I'm a professional.
Bear said he didn't get out of bed for 3 weeks. No, I'm just kidding you. So, what is Mira? What does Mira mean? Where are we, first of all?
Well, we're in the Yountville AVA of the Napa Valley, and it's one of the sweet spots of the valley. The valley's pretty small, so it's got, for the size of the valley, there's a lot of sweet spots here. But in terms of an area to grow grapes and have a winery presence, we couldn't have chosen or stumbled upon a better location than this. We'd been looking for a while, and we were fortunate to find this location available.
Did you know about this location just from your history in Napa?
I was familiar with the spot. Bear is the one who actually found the location.
I can only imagine how.
And
Let's be honest.
I think it was another bar situation. I'm pretty sure.
Craigslist.
I'm pretty sure it was another bar situation. But he told me, hey, can you go check out this property? I'm like, yeah, I think I know exactly where that is, because that's right around where when it rains really hard here every 10 years. That's where the road floods, and then we can't get to work.
Really?
Yeah, right out here on Highway 29.
So you got a deal.
Situations. And no, we didn't get a deal. That's for sure. But we realized that the vineyard that was on here needed to be replaced, and so when we were going to have to take Vineyards out to put the winery in anyway, we decided let's just cut the whole thing and hire a really, really good vineyard manager to help us replant and maybe provide some experience that could help us improve the drainage on the property so we don't have water backing up like we had. I'll never forget when we first bought the property. Bear came out here in February 17. It was a really rainy February, and he came out here with his what do you call it? What you put out to go fishing, so you don't get wet.
Not drifters.
No, not drifters.
Waders.
Yeah, he came out here with his waders, and he had water up to his waist in the middle of the vineyard, right? Because the vineyard was just not properly planted.
Really?
But with our vineyard manager, we realized that this is a really, really great area for growing the varietals that we replanted to.
That's what the real estate agent told you?
No, this is our vineyard guy.
Okay.
This is our vineyard guy.
And they're legitimate, I hope.
And he's very legit. He grows grapes for some pretty big names out here.
Yeah. Okay. So how many acres are we on right now?
We've got 16 total acres, 10 and a half planted.
Okay.
And the rest of it is pretty much the winery and other little infrastructure like little roads and stuff like that.
So are you sourcing a lot of stuff right now, or are you using all these grapes?
Well, our whole business started with contracts with external growers, a lot of it with the Hyde family and our top Cabernet that we're drinking here with the Schweitzer family and Stag's Leap. Mm-hmm. And so as our vineyards come into production, we're going to rely less and less on purchased fruit.
Okay, nice.
But the thing about purchased fruit that I always like to point out to people too is, this might not be the best area. It's great for what we're growing here, Bordeaux varietals, but it might not be so good for Pinot. So if we want to make a Pinot, we're going to go somewhere else that grows Pinot really well. So, and a family like the Hyde that has a lot of experience growing top quality fruit doesn't hurt.
So my first season last year, my technically challenged season, as I like to call it, I would say about 4 out of the first 10 episodes, they have some connection to Larry Hyde.
Oh, yeah?
Buy grapes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's legendary, per se.
He is.
In the wine industry and stuff like that. Do you grow Cabernet on this vineyard?
Our newest block is Cabernet Sauvignon.
Ooh,
and
nice.
It's going to be interesting when you come back and visit in the future. We're doing that head trained, so we're kind of going the old school route here.
Really?
And we're going to dry farm it.
Why?
Why not?
Okay.
You know, everybody, we got this VSP on everything else, vertical shoot position, and this is kind of the way everybody plants. And by the way, if you look at our pruning system, it's a little bit unique as well. Not a lot of people are using the one spur pruning that we're doing here. But we decided to do, I wanted to just have something different going on. And it's like having the history at Mondavi and having worked with some Cabernets that at the time were 45, 50 years old that were head trained and just producing really incredible fruit. I thought, if our vineyard manager thinks it's a good idea, why not? And just have a different story to tell out there and maybe just a whole different animal in terms of Cabernet.
Does it taste is it taste differently by doing that? Like, will the average normal person, no one's normal that listens to the show. The average person, the average wine drinker, tell a big difference or really understand what you're doing?
I think, if we have the same results that I experienced with the old vines up the road in Oakville, it's going to be something that people are going to notice. The quality of the fruit and the ensuing wine that's much more, it has more of everything, but still elegant. It's got more tannin, more phenolics, more color, but still it's a very elegant wine. I think people will see that, if we compare it with other Cabernets, even from the neighbors that are grown in this VSP situation. You definitely see it. And I think what happens, too, is the plants auto-regulate. And so for the environment that we're in, too, maybe it's a better system for growing. It's the canopy and the cover and all that. And, you have to understand that we're basically at the same latitude as Sicily. And I did a project in the south of Italy.
Never knew that.
With a professor, where we were trying to catalog old vines basically that were abandoned. And one of the things that I learned, this is, not trying to be organic or biodynamic, but there's certain cultural practices that they had there in terms of the way they pruned and how the air was supposed to flow through the vines, that they didn't need to use pesticides or anything like that. And so maybe, if we learn how to do that here, that'll have that kind of repercussion as well.
So where's the Nero d'Avola?
Nero d'Avola is South Italy.
Yeah. Where is it?
Sicily. We don't have any Nero d'Avola here now.
Well, you said same latitude.
Yeah, but it's the Mediterranean is a little bit different than the San Francisco Bay.
Can you imagine if you were trying to sell Nero d'Avola on the bulk market and from Napa? How much do you think you'd get for that?
Yeah, $10 maybe a gallon. I don't know.
A gallon.
A gallon.
So what's that, a ton?
Wow. I mean, Nero d'Avola, a ton. Well, I guess you'd have to factor in the scarcity factor. If people thought, they were turned on by that.
Cult wine. Yeah, cult wine.
Then maybe you'd get more for it, but yeah. Nero d'Avola is not an expensive wine from Italy, so I couldn't imagine planting it here.
It's probably going to be, well, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just stick to the guns. All right, we're going to be right back with Gustavo. All right, back with Gustavo. What are we drinking? I mean, the bottle looks nice. You talked about it a little bit.
We're very, very proud of this wine. So this is a Schweitzer Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's a single vineyard. It's in the Stag's Leap District, and it's not too far from our property here. I love history, and I love the history of wine as well. This vineyard, much like ours, was originally planted in the 1880s. And so this, for me, that kind of tells me that it's a site that people have recognized as a prime grape growing area in the Napa Valley. So it's been a continuous vineyard since the 1880s. Of course, they've replanted, since then. Grapes don't last forever everywhere. And the family that owns it now, the Schweitzer family, has had it since the 50s. And so they're owner-operators. They're not some baron from the Northeast that comes here once a year. They're actually there doing the work.
I'm hearing that more often. I've been in Paso, I've been in Santa Barbara this week, and they're all saying, it's. I think people have what is the word I'm looking for? I don't say dislike, but I think people that live here look differently than the people that don't live here.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a...
I think that's right.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it.
Nothing wrong.
Yeah. So do they bottle any of this under their own label, or they sell it?
They have 43 acres, and all that they've ever done is sell grapes.
Wow.
And so they have a couple different customers. And so Steve, the son, when he told me he had some grapes available, we were looking for a Cabernet to be our flagship wine. And so I said, Steve, look, I love your fruit. I love Stag's Leap, and I love your property, and the profile that your Cabernet has is much different than a bunch of the other areas that I've worked with in the Napa Valley. And I said, would you consider selling me some of this? Because, you don't just knock on people's door and they sell you grapes, right?
You don't knock on people's random door and tell them you love their fruit. That'd be kind of like, especially another man, that's kind of weird.
Right. But
I love your fruit, Gustavo.
But I had worked with this fruit before.
Oh, you have? Okay.
And he'd seen what I'd done with it, and we kind of think along the same lines in terms of grape growing, and he kind of knows when I'm ready to pick, because as the winemaker, I get to make the choice of when to harvest, right? Even on the fruit that we buy, I make the decisions on how the grapes are grown. And
is that common?
It's pretty common around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have total control. You just don't really have ownership of the land.
That's right. And we always get the same piece of land that year in, year out. We always get the same area, which is important for consistency on the grapes that we purchase. And
do you usually sign, I don't know if you can say this or not, but is it usually a long-term contract, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, year to year? I mean, how does it?
The most common thing here in Napa is a 2-year evergreen. So every 2 years it auto-renews unless somebody wants to get out. They say so a year in advance. Mm. And so usually it just kind of keeps going.
So what happens, like, if there's, I hate bringing this up, a fire or earthquake or smoke taint? Do you have to take possession of those grapes? No.
It depends a lot on that's where having a really good relationship with your grower is key.
Right.
And like a situation like last year with the smoke, everybody was trying to do the best they can, and some growers have crop insurance and some don't. Unfortunately, so
insurance ain't cheap.
Insurance is not cheap, and so we have to do what's best for us too in terms of making the wine, and you work with them as close as you can, and they know if the grapes, let's say if it's a Schweitzer situation, if he knows that it's going to be a smoky situation with his grapes, he's not going to want his name on it. So
no.
He'll understand. Maybe they're not going to take the grapes this year.
How do you think the 2020 vintage will be perceived in the media and then also with consumers? Just knowing what happened last year. And I don't really want to go in depth with it.
Yeah.
Because I really just want to talk politics and religion with you.
Right. That'll be next.
Yeah.
Well,
welcome to part 17 of the Gustavo Gonzalez episode.
Well, what I'm hoping is that it's much better penned in the journals than the 2011 vintage was. I think 2011. I just had this conversation with Mike Dunn from Dunn Vineyards up in Howell Mountain. Yeah.
Rock star like you. And one of my favorite vintages was 2011 because that's the last time my wife came with me here, and then 9 months later we had a child. I don't think there's a direct correlation.
No,
none.
Drinking.
His name is Jack. We're actually bringing all of them in July, but here nor there. But I will tell you, 2011, and I've heard this from numerous people in the wine industry like yourself, it was a damn good vintage.
Yeah.
And I had a 2011 Dunn Howell Mountain Vineyard cab today. Awesome.
Yeah. I agree.
Awesome.
I mean, it's just a matter of time. 2011 was a weather situation, and you just have to know how to deal with the grapes that are grown in that kind of season. And sometimes grapes like that, or wines made from those grapes, require more time. And so, the vintage got slammed early on, but now it's becoming a swan, basically.
Yeah.
Much like the 98, same thing. 98 was penned, written about really poorly, and then a few years later, people are like, I don't see what's wrong with it. This is a great wine.
I think there you just in lies a great point, that you need to listen to the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast, because we've said all along 2011 was a fantastic vintage.
Yeah.
Maybe more people. Hopefully that will get a couple more downloads.
And like I said, you have to let the wine develop, right? And some wine's not ready to drink when it's young.
It's like, when you're a teenager and you're like in that ugly stage, girl and boy, pimples and stuff like that. And then you see the girl like 15 years later, maybe at a reunion, so you're like, okay, it's kind of like that, right?
Right.
We got some great comparisons here.
That's right.
So what are you tasting in some of your stuff for 2020?
Well, I don't think any winery is going to put out wines that are
you'd hope not
bad on purpose, right? So everybody's we're still trying to figure it out, to be honest with you, and there's not a whole lot of information about smoke and its effect on wines, and if there are any effects, when do they show up and things like that. I mean, there's chemistry that can be gotten, there's things you can analyze for, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to show up in the taste. Mm-hmm. So it requires a lot of patience and tasting, and then hopefully people don't pan the entire vintage. You know, there's going to be some producers that are going to be more affected than others or totally affected, but that doesn't mean that the producer next door made a bad wine. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that people are a lot more considerate about the vintage than they were with 2011.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a vintage you probably as a human being don't really want to remember.
Right.
Just with everything going on.
Yeah.
So this is delicious. What vintage? This is 2015.
It's 2015.
That's Jack. Jack was born in 2015. If someone was to write a tasty note on you, how would it go?
On me?
Yeah. On you, the man, the winemaker, whatever you want to call it. How would the tasty note go?
That's a
creepy yet interesting question.
I would say charming yet sophisticated.
So charming answer. That's 3 words.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got someone to write a tasty note on you.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't understanding the heritage of this wine and its corresponding price is intimidating. They're calling you intimidating. But immediately opening the bottle, the magnificent aromas, they say you smell good, you shower, express a joyous big heart. The first sip reflects a quality that far exceeds the packaging or price and create a joyous vibe on the palate and a smile to the lips. Oh my God. With additional sip, there is a recognition of the depth and complexity found only in the most elite of producers. There's nothing overwhelming about the wine. Sip after sip presents a balance that is hard to find. The more you learn about the wine, I already said that. As you turn the bottle up for that last pour and realize it's empty, you're blown away by how, for all its complexities, the wine was incredibly approached. You know there is so much more to experience if only you had one more glass. Bear wrote that about you.
Well, you know what? Bear is the wordsmith.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just want a 1 or 2 sentence thing. He wrote like a freaking soliloquy. It's kind of creepy. I'm a little bit worried, like sip after sip. You might have to, I don't know how that's going to go, but this wine is delicious.
Thank you. Now, this is a fantastic wine. I'm really, really proud of this. We had this in a tasting, a different vintage of this. We recreated the Judgment of Paris in Charleston in 2016 for the 40th anniversary of that tasting. Mm-hmm. And we had 13 or 15 wine professionals from around the country in our tasting room in Charleston.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, that's before we knew you.
Well, exactly. That's a good answer.
So, for the next one, the 50th anniversary,
yeah,
we'll
tell
sure
me.
we invite you.
Yeah,
All
I'll probably be out of business, but thank you. That's good. Just tell me which one's yours.
Right. We'll say, hey, touch it, and when I wink, that's
number. So what other wines were you competing against, if you can say?
Well, my idea was that the whole winemaking world has changed in 76. Everybody makes wine a little bit differently than back then. People have learned different things. The French maybe have more of an American approach now, although they'll never say it.
Yeah.
And even here, the big players in 76 are not the same ones that are the big players now in terms of fame. Mm-hmm. And so I worked with our barrel supplier from Taranto, his name is Jean-Pierre, to select 4 Bordeaux wines, 2 left bank, 2 right bank. And then with a Somme in Charleston, we selected 4 Napa wines, 2 Oakville, 2 Stag's Leap. Not necessarily because there was a relationship between Médoc and,
Right.
But just thinking of the important areas in Napa for Cabernet at the time for me. So we had from Bordeaux, we had from one side of the river, we have Chateau Latour and Haut-Brion. And the other side of the river, we had Petrus and Angelus. So, it was a cheap tasting, is what I'm saying.
So did people pay to try it?
No, we didn't tell people what they were tasting.
So how many bottles of each did you get?
We bought 2 bottles in case one was corked.
Oh, my God.
And so, we told these people, we want you to come to Charleston. You're going to participate in this blind tasting of 8 wines. And all we want you to do is give us your number 1 wine through your number 8 wine. Give us, if you wish, and it makes it easy for you, give us a 100-point scale rating. And let's have a discussion about each wine. Right. So I was a little bit scared to put ours in because no one had ever heard of Schweitzer. But, we're like, we're doing this tasting, and it's our tasting. Let's throw it in there. Right?
What were the 3 other American wines?
So the 3 other ones were, the other one from Stag's Leap was Schaefer Hillside Select. Shocker. And from Oakville, we had Screaming Eagle.
Oh, my God.
And we had a Schrader Tokelon. And I forget which of the RBs.
Oh, my God. Did you get at least a trade discount on those?
No. No. So,
holy cow!
Yeah, we had the sommelier from Charleston set up the tasting, right? So nobody knew what was what. me and the son were the only ones that knew the wine, so we didn't participate in the tasting, right? But he did the shuffling. We put them in brown bags, poured them, A through G, I think it was 8 letters. G is the 8th letter, is that right? It's the first letter of my name.
C D E F G. Yeah. No, H.
H is it? Okay,
H,
so maybe it was H.
A B C D E F G H.
Okay,
good.
One off.
4 degrees between the two of us, and we can't figure it out.
Right.
Communication majors and masters, of course.
So we tasted the wines, and then we did the big reveal. Right, everybody scored, and we tabulated the results, and we came up with the number 1 through the number 8, based on the number 1 wine had the least amount of points, the number 8 wine had the most, right? Because it was the number 8. And so by the time we were finished, ours came in number 3, and it was the top wine from Napa. The number 1 was Haut-Brion, number 2 was Petrus, and number 3 was us. And then 10 points later was the next Napa wine, which was Screaming Eagle, 2012 vintage.
So what was your reasoning behind doing that?
Because I wanted to see if the wines from the countries, the 2 different countries that participated in that tasting in '76, how they were different now. 40 years later, the winemaking has changed. Maybe what people thought of French wine at the time, the way the French wine was made at the time, was not the same as how it is now. And these names had popped up in the 2000s, basically Schrader and Screaming Eagle specifically. Schaefer was already around.
Yeah,
Mira was not around. So I wanted to see how these new players now, they get a lot of recognition, how they stacked up to some of these top players from France.
Wow. How did it go over in the media? How did it help you guys? I mean, was it a good PR stunt? I mean, I'm going to call it PR stunt.
No, we didn't get a lot of PR out of it, to be honest.
Should have invited me.
We should have.
Yeah.
We didn't get a lot of PR, and that's not necessarily the reason we did it, was to get PR. It was more, this idea that I had, that I wanted to see if there was a difference between these cult wines. Now, there were no cult wines.
Yeah, there is a huge difference in price.
In price.
And I mean, that's all it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, this retails for how much in the tasting room?
This is $377.
Holy cow! Really?
But we make 300 cases of this.
377.
377.
Oh, just wait.
But that's
I'm finishing this.
we were by far the cheapest wine on the table in this tasting at 377.
What was the most expensive? You should know you paid for it.
It was either Screaming Eagle or Petrus, one of those.
God,
those were the most expensive ones.
What vintages were they? All the same vintage?
No, we had different vintages from 10 through 12, and the reason that we did that was because I didn't want to favor, like 12 was an incredible vintage year, but maybe not so good in France. 10 was a great year in France, and so I wanted to do a head-to-head on great vintages, or a selection of different vintages.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I was really proud that this came in number 3, and the 1, 2, and 3 wines were all within a couple points. So any one of the 3 wines could have been 1, 2, or 3.
Who came last?
Was Angelus, which was a big surprise to me, because that's one of my favorite wines. It's a Cabernet Franc, but it just wasn't showing well. Yeah.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was the kind of the big, most surprising one for you.
The bigg't surprise, and also Latour is one of my favorites, and I was surprised that it was towards the end of the roundup too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, obviously that's good because you had that many people in the wine trade, obviously vote. So there's obviously you guys are doing something great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And nobody had this, and it was just kind of interesting to hear the comments. And of course, we're sitting there biting our nails saying, as long as we're not number 8, we're fine. But, in reality, in that group of wines, if you're the worst one there, you're doing pretty good, depending on the points.
You're still a top wine.
Yeah.
How nervous was Bear?
Bear's pretty confident.
Yeah.
He has a lot of confidence in this, the wines that we make and what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he had an expectation where we were going to place.
Yeah.
But he just knew, and I think we all knew this, that we belonged in that group of wines.
Mm-hmm. What did you give each of those people that voted for you guys for Christmas presents?
We bought them all Rolls Royces. Sorry, I didn't invite you. Yeah,
the miniature ones.
The miniature ones. Yeah,
the Hole's voice.
Right.
So what's the future? What do you guys? I mean, obviously we're in hopefully the tail end of all this crap. What do you? and Bear doing to kind of get you in the right place for when things kind of hopefully turn back to normal, or at least close to that? I mean, are you doing some different stuff? Are you creating some new blends? What are you guys doing?
Well, the main thing that we have on the horizon wine-wise is the wine that's going to be produced from our own property. I think you saw the egg last time you were here.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the egg wine to look forward to as well. And in the meantime, it's setting ourselves up for an extraordinary experience when people visit.
Yeah.
And hopefully they like the wines too.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty good.
I think we needed to have a beautiful setting like this to make people really like the wines.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think once you're here and you're kind of in trance, I mean, you come in here, it's gorgeous as long as someone lets you through the gates.
And we have to let you out of the gate too. So,
really? That's a good idea.
If we don't get the right number on that purchase sheet, we're not opening those gates.
It's kind of like another winery on Highway 29. I will not mention their name because they might actually listen to us. They literally will just pour till you. I mean, they don't pour till you can't stand, but I mean, they pour heavy.
Yeah.
And I don't know anybody that's ever been there that's not bought a significant amount of wine. And then you get home. It's like, I remember my wife and I came before we had kids. So 13, 14 years ago, 56, I don't even know. And for some reason, I bought every single Merlot in the Valley. And then I drank them like 3, 4, 5 years later. I'm like, what the hell am I thinking? But this is gorgeous. And just, you guys really spared no expense. And it's just a great, do you guys make olive oil?
We do not. We only have, 6 olive producing trees, and that's not enough to make oil.
Why not?
We can make a thimble's worth of oil, probably.
That's all right. Just butter me up. I love olive oil. Grease me up. Gustavo, thank you so much for spending the time, as always. I'm trying to think who we can interview next year from Mira.
Well, you might have to repeat the cycles
a couple
years because
exactly.
There's only 4 of us here, 5 now with Ed. So,
exactly. Maybe we'll just
start over.
Maybe we'll just tell Ed he's going to do. You won't even tell him. So we're going to do a little bonus content for our Patreon page with Gustavo. We're going to really make him look at himself in the mirror, and maybe he'll just hate me a little bit more. But thank you so much, Gustavo, for welcoming me into this phenomenal place in Yountville. If you guys are ever in the Napa area, you've got to come to Mira. They make some really great stuff, and great people. I don't know if they're better wines than people, because you and Bear are just awesome. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep listening to the Cork Taylor Wine Podcast. Share with your friends. Repeat, replay. Pass it on. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, and support us by joining our Patreon page. So thank you so much.